add one thing. The one piece that staff is not yet comfortable with is we know what the current revenues are out there. We have a history of that. But if the city hypothetically were to take it over, what could we do to increase that and generate more revenue? Because as pointed out, as it stands, if we take it over, there'll be a funding gap of nearly $2 million a year, so it's a money loser. We have just last week engaged a firm, Keister Marston Associates, who will in short order come and do a quick study for council with the possibilities. This is what they do. They do marinas, they do revenues from marinas, and we've asked them to look at the assets out there and give us a realistic view of what the future might look like and what revenues we might generate, to see is there a path, whether it's 3, 5, or 10 years from now, where it can at least break even. So we will bring that to council once that study is prepared, but I would think that would be something you would want to consider in your decision.
Mike, with that study, I'm wondering if the Oyster Point Cove is a really small marina, but looks to be very successful. It's a whole different feeling when you're on that side of the plant.
Big time.
The St. Francis Yacht Club comes to mind as a private marina that's well run. So while we might be the owner of the marina, do we necessarily have to be the operator of the marina?
We do not. The Cove, for example, has lower birth cost, but it's 100% occupied.
Right.
As is the marina at Brisbane, 100% occupied. The birth rates at Oyster Point, we are 60% occupied, and they're the highest in the bay.
Really?
So it's
Really?
And that's I'm told that's recognized by the Harbor District, but they're dysfunctional and can't make that decision. So, but there's no reason why we could not basically say a private person could operate that on our behalf under the supervision of Parks and Rec. And
when you look at marinas, it's for a privileged few that own boats and keep them docked. I think most people in town keep them on the driveway or sidewalk. But my point is, it's for a privileged few, and the park portion is for everybody in South San Francisco. The marina portion.
And it reaches more because when Scott was doing the Kite Day and the Easter parade or Easter thing, I attended those, and they were not just South City. I mean, they were people from other cities, because I went around and I started asking. Well, I didn't recognize, not that I know everybody. It was a regional draw.
Yeah.
And I read in this report that Brisbane subsidizes their berth fees. It said in this report that they subsidize, and also having, because I had nothing better to do, attending the Harbor District meetings. They have major infrastructure that has to be fixed in the immediate future. They can't afford to wait on a yearly and plan it, which means that they're gonna have to bond out or something in order, because otherwise they're non-compliant and they've got boat and waterways on their back. So, if we stay there, that's going to increase.
It's only going to get worse.
It's going to get worse as opposed to better. And with all due respect, that board has no concept of how to manage. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm just not confident in if things stay the way they are, that in 10 years, when this agreement ends, they're going to have accomplished a whole lot of needed repairs out there to start with, because my gut feeling is they're putting most of their efforts at the paying, which is Pillar Point. It's a working harbor. They process fish and all that other stuff there.
But if you look at the numbers, they carry a larger annual deficit.
Yeah, they do.
At Pillar Point, by a little bit.
They do. If you look at the CIP allocations, the lion's share by far go to Pillar Point.
Right.
The way I look at it is that I want to step back a little bit from this immediate question, and I think option 1, A, B, C, that you pointed out, will change depending on how your study comes up. Like you were talking about the revenue picture. we are looking at a sick operation right now. And based on that, we are practically taking their numbers as a number to start off, and that's the best way of doing it. We can't generate numbers out of the blue. But on the other hand, I see a number of things happening right now at this point in time, which, in my mind, the time is of essence, because we have a number of things going on. One is our economic growth right now may not last very long. We may not have a opportunity of absorbing shocks, like little financial shocks. Number two, if we can light a fire under Shorenstein and get that project going, that area is going to become very attractive, very fast. People will be looking for housing, people will be looking for recreation, people will be looking for other facilities. And I'm not talking of marina operations, I'm talking of parks and public places. And I know under the Shorenstein agreement, we have a horse trading on some properties where we develop parks, we develop roads, we develop restrooms, and we develop other public facilities. So I want to get started on that. And if we want, I have seen personally harbor operation for the last 3, 4, 5 years, as long as I've been involved since the Planning Commission days. And it's always catch as catch can. It's not a planned organization, it's not a visionary organization. It is basically trying to cover minimum debts. It's like paying the down minimum payment on your credit card. So basically, if you give them time, it's going to be even worse in terms of the obligations. So to me, it looks like that if we are confident of our own city and our own operation and our own ability to manage affairs, I think we got to take our risks. And I'm not saying you jump in without looking at it carefully, but I like to combine option B and C. I would like to work together with county so that we don't lose much of that tax revenue. At the same time, keep a pressure on both the county supervisors, because I understand Supervisor Tissier and Supervisor Don Horsley's approach, but let's face it, this district is part of Dave Pine and Carol Groom, and they should be interested in those events. So I think we should argue our case with the county and not really give more rope than we have already given to the harbor district. And I'm not saying it's a particular set of commissioners right now in harbor district. Just the setup itself has not functioned very well for the city, as far as I can understand. And this is a hidden gem, and we have been hiding it so long. I think as a city, we should capitalize it. Property values are going up. Developers are willing to risk their necks out right now, and this is the time we should take control of the situation.
I think I see some strings attached to early termination of the JPA. I don't know what the vote on that commission would be to address the debt issue. And that's where we're coming from, as I understand. We would agree to do that if they would address the debt issue, am I correct?
Well, that's why in staff report, we listed the 3 obstacles that we would suggest. One being the debt. It is laden with debt. Number 2 is the over $5.5 million in capital improvements. Basically, if they turned it over without addressing that, you'd get a pretty rotten house. And then number 3 is the fact that it operates annually at a pretty large loss, which, unless we accounted for that, would suddenly become the city's responsibility. However, if we could theoretically negotiate through all 3 of those, they do have sufficient reserves. Theoretically, right now, they could go pay off the debt today with what they have. They are, as noted in the report, actively looking to bond out an additional $3.6 million in debt, refinance their existing debt to get a lower interest rate. There may be an opportunity in that to do some of the capital improvements. And then I think it would be worth exploring some revenue sharing on the tax portion for some period of time, once we're comfortable. When do we think we could increase the revenues? So I think if all three of those could be met on an amicable basis, there may be a deal to be had that council could consider.
See, and that's just the whole thing, we're talking destination, or, if, for instance, we took the $250,000 that Genentech gave us for the bathroom, we put it down there, we set it up, when it went down there with a big enough pad to accommodate other things, you know, for instance, a bait and tackle shop would do a lot. These are small revenue, but they're still, you know, looking at revenue generators. But the current thought on the harbor district is, we can't be bothered, you know, so they're not gonna help us, cause that has to go through the boat and waterways, but, you know, we'll never get our foot in the door.
Do they have, if 10 years or the end of the original agreement were to run, and they handed the city of South San Francisco a broken product, do they have any, is there any legal recourse?
Yeah.
If they, you know, don't do any of the?
I mean, if they stay within the confines of the JPA, which is operate and maintain the park, and don't kind of do any malfeasance, like in, you know,
Yeah.
trashing things, but essentially just kind of do the bare minimum,
Yeah.
it'll be pretty challenging to kind of force them to.
Good point, so 10 years from now, we'd have the same debt.
Yeah, or maybe more.
More.
Maybe more.
Good point.
Probably more. Yeah.
Do we know what they want? Or will we find that out shortly? At the end of September? We have a meeting with 2 members?
I think so.
Do you know who we meet with?
I know Sabrina Brennan is one of the liaison members. So, we haven't yet had a meeting of the joint
I think we're trying to
liaison
coordinate a
committee.
date.
I think right now looking September 30th in the afternoon. And I know Sabrina Brennan is one, and the other one escapes me. The only thing I know about early termination is what I heard Commissioner Brennan say at county supervisor
probably
meetings,
Tom
at
Mateo.
LAFCO, and at
That's right.
their own meetings,
not
is
relevant.
that this is
not
a drag on
relevant.
the district, and they need to terminate it today.
yeah,
And
it is, Tom.
then there are members of the public who stand up and say the same thing during public comments, but I've never heard any of the other 4 harbor
Sabrina's-
districts comment, members comment on that.
And I've heard that Tom Matoush probably will not run again. When he opted to run,
Yeah.
he didn't know that there would be 7 days a week meetings. I mean, she has the meetings and they're all getting overburdened, so the 2 candidates that she has lined up to run
Already?
are very radical.
Already?
Uh-huh.
Well, next year is elections, and I think 3 out of, are they all up or just 3 out of 5?
No.
You know, there are harbor district
I
elections
think,
next year.
yeah, and as I said, Tom, it's because they have a lot of special meetings and the subcommittee or the committee meetings, and they're getting burned out. And so I heard Tom said enough is enough, that he will step down. And I know a couple of I've inquired, the names were thrown out to me, and I've made some inquiries, and they're radical like
Rich
Sabrina.
was just telling me the same thing.
Do we have anyone at their meeting tonight?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
At their meeting tonight, they added today a special item.
For the probably general manager?
They do have a closed session to consider personnel matters, which I assume is negotiations on their new general manager. Then they have a public session about appointing a new general manager. But they also have an item that was added either yesterday or today to discuss the episode in June at the Oyster Point Yacht Club where the videotaping device was taken off the window. So, yeah, but we do have
It's all
someone
about
there. And we now make sure we always have a staff member at the meeting. I think Jim went to the one previous, I went to the one previous. We're kind of sharing the experience.
Do we have do we have that September 30th liaison committee agenda?
I don't think we have it yet.
drafted?
There is no agenda so far. What their staff has voiced to Diana in setting it up is they are looking for just a meet and greet whether we
There are a lot
want
more.
That's a liaison, you know, meet and greet.
whether we want to actually suggest topics for substantive discussion, I'm not sure. But,
They're trying to work with my schedule, cause if I know if we start at 9 o'clock, I may not never get to work. So I need to be able to do a meeting later in the day to not worry about going to the next event, so Mark and I are waiting.
No, I was thinking about that, this meeting, besides being meet and greet, definitely should shed some light on some of the strategy we are looking at in terms of how do we deal with the JPA? Some of the questions that we have been raising and thinking about, perhaps should be part of the discussion that you both have in the meeting next.
Right, right. Yeah, if we got if there was some kind of consensus, we might be able to share it. I don't know if we're there, are we?
No, I don't think so.
See, and this is the whole thing, both, Horsey represents, but the whole thing is we have to give them a chance. Well, even with the reorg, things haven't changed. I mean, they had a committee meeting of which Robert Bernardo was one of the members. 2 people, he got ill, violently ill, couldn't attend it. So Sabrina has the meeting on her own.
One person.
One person.
She
and-
agreed with herself, no doubt.
Yes, and then.
It passed.
She actually didn't.
Good one, Jim.
And then they had another meeting, and they announced something about the new director. They came out of closed session, it wasn't agenda, I mean, so, you know, the idea, they're not,
Fast and loose.
they have no idea of the Brown Act.
Matoush doesn't know how to run a meeting.
The thing that scares me the most is that ongoing debt. That
The financial
Yeah.
$2 million
tuition.
a year.
You're buying a pig and a poke.
Yeah, you know,
Right.
we really, but
I mean-
we're gonna be faced with that, eventually.
correct.
So we need to, tackle it and,
Yeah.
and put some effort in.
Well, it could be worse.
And in the future, when we get it, times could be
Right.
on the
Right.
other end
I
of the
think that's
curve.
what Pradeep was alluding
Yeah.
to. This might be an optimum time to,
Well, and to that point, that's why we brought in an expert that has done this in other marinas, and we'll come back to council in 45 days or so with a subsequent study session just on that, to answer the question of will we be
so
stuck?
they're an accounting firm, what are they?
No, they do marina
They're consultants for,
management.
oh, all right.
Right,
all
so
And who
they-
are they?
Kaiser Marston.
Right, there was an interview process of some 4 similar firms. One was conflicted out because they do work for the Harbor District.
So they are the marketing folks or they are the management folks? This company?
Economic analysis.
Yes.
Either we've used them before, I've been in the county, but
heard the name before.
I'm familiar with them because they've been either here or on one of the other bodies
Right.
I sit on. We've
I think-
hired
I think
them to
we've
do
used them
work.
before.
Okay.
I think
see,
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, their
Yeah.
name is very familiar to me.
So hopefully, though, that will show us a path to get out of that annual operating deficit.
It could be successful if it were properly managed. You
I
can turn it
think so.
around. It's not gonna happen
The
overnight.
county operates Coyote Point through their park and recreation. Would they like a second facility?
No,
Yeah.
they won't take
No.
us on.
No?
No, that was made
Economy of scale and all?
pretty clear. They don't want anything to do with it.
I think there's great opportunities. Park and Rec, I heard at one point, wanted to do sailing classes. If nothing else, it's cost recovery, and it brings it as a destination. When Scott was brand new to here, he was telling me about a school they had up in the north with Microsoft, and the perfect thing would be with Sea Rise, whatever. There could be a facility out there. I mean, so it becomes more regional and destination and.
Well, you know, the other big, I guess, negative out there, and I know a lot of the members there, is that yacht club. There's a lot of good people who belong to that, but they're dysfunctional within their own organization. Nobody wants to do anything. They don't promote the marina, they don't promote anything. I mean, they have a lot of parties, and they throw a pretty good party, I gotta tell you. But, you know, they really don't do anything to partner up with, you know, to promote the yachts, or the yacht club, or the marina. There's no activities for any, you know, they just don't do it. It's a shame, because that building is in dire need of some
Renovation.
real bad renovations, so. But they can't even get anybody to paint the walls.
You know, these docks that, cost, 1.2, 1.5 to redo those.
Yeah.
I don't know if those are in, if there's the east basin and the west basin, the west basin
I don't know what to look
was
at.
the original, and I'm thinking if we're at 60%,
Where are those
um,
docks, do we know?
why not just, if they're, go ahead.
They've only recently rehabilitated 2 of the docks, and
As part of the,
for the,
for the-
when, I think it was,
when the ferry was.
2012 or so, they
Yeah.
rehabilitated those, but the other ones are at or beyond their useful life of 30 years.
Right, but why would you commit to these type of investments if you don't have the need in the area now? I mean, you might wanna demo it and leave the west basin, the original basin, empty until the economy turned around and.
That's
you could
one of the
just-
questions we've asked the expert.
Okay,
And we've
So
added.
we're gonna get that kind of
And
information.
we've tried very hard not to put any boundaries on them, just
Right.
to experiment. Maybe we get rid of all of them and bring in floating houses operated by Genentech. Wild idea. Maybe we, so we'll let
You have to
them.
get that by BCDC, yeah. Housing on the bay, yeah. I like the idea though.
But to your point, to your point, I think that's correct thinking. And we'll bring in an expert that can run the numbers and say what makes sense.
Right.
And what kind of revenue would that generate? But as far as staff, if I look back in history, the last time we had a study session relative to the Harbor District was August of 2014. At that time, the charge to staff was to work with the current board and do the best we can. Since that time, there's been an election and LAFCO report and a lot of water under the bridge, so we felt it was important to put the issue back before you to see, is that still the guidance?
Yes, we need to.
What I've heard from Councilmember Gupta is option 2 and 3, which would be different, which is develop a case and what we need so that we can pursue early termination of the JPA if favorable terms are possible, while at the same time on a parallel path working option 3, which would be dissolution, and continue to work with the county on whatever timeline they have. So I assume if the early termination efforts were to fail, then the backup plan would be to work with county towards dissolution of the Harbor District. But that's.
Which sounds like a great creative solution to be able to, I mean, obviously, number one, to keep the JPA till 2026, that's just, that's off the table, but I think
Yeah,
what
I
Councilman
support.
Gupta mentioned as far as a
I
creative
wouldn't go for
solution,
that.
you know, as far as being able to, that way it allows us time to really kind of work through the financials and also
Yes.
the long-term range, the possibility of what Oyster Point can be as well too, so.
We need to
I think
do
hiring
due
these experts
diligence.
is a good deal. See what they turn up, and then I think after we see their report, we can maybe, with a little more intelligence, figure out what it is we need to do.
Yes.
And beyond actually the numbers and figures and dollars and cents, I think just their tendency to ignore Oyster Point in terms of its needs and its requirements and its potential, I think is a detriment to our city and our residents of the city, because it's part of the city which has been underutilized, underdeveloped, and we are doing a lot of marketing of the city, keeping that asset aside at this point in time. And I think that if we had that asset as one of the tools in our tool chest, I think we'll have much more flexibility of selling our beach areas, our coastal areas. You know, there might be some developers who might be very interested in looking at this picture, as opposed to Shorenstein only holding the cards.
Talking about investments. that
Yes,
kind of-
yes,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's a great site. I mean,
Right.
visually, it's so pleasant some days, but
Yeah.
it needs a lot of money.
Maybe we could do a 5K, didn't Cliff do, cause he's a runner, but we could do a 5K and have food trucks out there, or, I mean, there's just a way we could
There's
start
opportunities.
promoting it.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, it's a relationship that's not working, and I think it has to be, I mean, it has to be a gradual separation, and having to realize that in order to maintain relationships, whether it's political or personal, beyond this, is having to really go through an uncontested divorce, per se. That's just my phrase, but just be able to agree to disagree, and then it's just a relationship that's just not working for both. And I think it's frustrating for me to see this council who's been involved with the San Mateo County Harbor District for so long, and for me to sit in a few meetings already, it's just, and the communications, and I mean, obviously, we're here a year later, and there has not been any movement, except I spent nearly 8 hours of my time sitting at a general manager's interview panel, where they may be opportunity to say, hey, look, give him a chance, or her a chance. I think we already kind of made up our minds emotionally. There has to be some disconnection.
Let me ask a
That's
question.
my-
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
If it were to come to a dissolution, and it went to the Board of Supervisors, are they the policymakers that would say that the property tax revenue could be split? Would that fall under their jurisdiction?
As I appreciated working with Martha at LAFCO, yes. And they could theoretically then sign a new JPA
dissolution.
with the city, where we would operate Oyster Point on behalf of the county,
Yeah.
and as part of that, share in those tax revenues.
So
So
we need
that
three
is
votes.
one path.
Which the commission is now getting.
That really surprises me, the county of San Mateo, I mean, this is a separate entity.
So, yeah, I mean,
Please.
so there's, with the dissolution process, there is this tax negotiation process that happens with the affected agencies. Our analysis suggests that the two affected agencies would be the county and the city. When there is a district that is subject to dissolution, the county negotiates on behalf of them. So basically, the county would be negotiating with us to get a property tax exchange. If the city and the county can agree on a property tax exchange, then the dissolution process can proceed. LAFCO has to approve it. But all this is predicated on the county or some other entity being the lead agency and stepping in as the successor in interest.
Okay, but that's a dissolution of the entire body.
Correct.
So back it up
Yeah,
a notch.
yes.
If we're negotiating with the Harbor District, they can negotiate any type of a sales tax split?
Help me, but-
Yeah, so there's.
Just up to 26.
So
so why would they go down?
dissolution is,
They wouldn't go
so
down.
anytime there's a change in organization pursuant to LAFCO, that's when there's a property tax negotiation. It's part of the LAFCO proceeding. Negotiating directly with the Harbor District about the JPA, if they're agreeing to give us some money to take over, that would be kind of before the dissolution process. So there's kind of like, the city's kind of pushing towards this same kind of objective, and it can happen kind of before the dissolution process, as part of it, or after. There's like different ways where it can strategically happen, and it kind of depends on who the city is able to engage with and have successful discussions. So if the city is saying, the council's saying, we want to work with the Harbor District first, that fails, then go to the next step. That's a direction that we can get from the
So if
council.
there's ultimately complete dissolution of the Harbor District, and the county's negotiating for them, are we negotiating in any case past 26?
Yes.
Yes.
Which is potentially one of the advantages of dissolution.
Right.
That property tax allocation would continue
Right.
in perpetuity.
Yeah.
But essentially,
And the
county-
county 5.5 a year right now?
Yes, yes.
And a good portion of it comes from South San Francisco anyway? And
they would likely negotiate so that our portion, whatever comes from South San Francisco, would be that which is allocated. But
it's a
it's
regional
still,
draw, I don't
it's still
know,
in
yeah.
perpetuity.
Hopefully we could get to that 2 million figure, but
And the LAFCO report actually recommends that if that dissolution negotiation happens, that the subsidy to South San Francisco would go down over time. Now, that's just a recommendation by LAFCO. It's not binding, but that is on record what Martha Poyatos
A
has
point of
recommended.
negotiation.
But too, if we think we're as good as we are,
in respects to what?
making it
Making it work.
making it work,
Okay.
and it becoming, at least self-sufficient, over time, dealing with some of the infrastructure, but making it, generating more revenue through a property manager, a company or whatever, you know, it would help decrease our dependency on the property tax. You know, there are some things I think we could do. And under your idea about the county, we would operate on behalf of the county and share, remember you just mentioned it,
Right.
we would be the agent of the county.
Dissolution, the county supervisors become essentially the successor agency to the harbor district.
Okay.
And they're now responsible for all the debt and all the obligations, so they step into the shoes of the harbor district vis-a-vis our JPA. So now we would have our JPA with the county, and the county would have the obligation to operate Oyster Point. Well, I don't believe they actually want to operate
No,
Oyster
they
Point,
don't.
so they would subcontract
To us.
that work back to the city, and as part of that negotiation, when we subcontract work, we would say, well, we obviously need funds to do that, and that's where the negotiations could come in.
So we would be part of the JPA, the county, but also a service provider to the JPA contract. You play
Yes.
two roles.
Yes.
Yes.
Because ultimately, I don't think the county's gonna wanna assume that, you know, if they refinance and bonding and the debt is gonna get greater, they're, if I were a supervisor,
They want out of it.
I would not want to be in that position.
I wanted to add something to what Mike said earlier to make sure it was clear. If that negotiation process for property tax exchange, if there's no agreement, the dissolution doesn't occur. There has to be an agreement on property tax exchange in order for there to be a dissolution.
And to piggyback on what Jim is saying, that's predicated on somebody filing an application for dissolution. So if it's not gonna be us, we need to convince the county that it's them that is
Or
initiating.
Or theoretically, any party could.
Any party could file it.
A sewer district on the coast side, for example, could file and seek dissolution of the harbor district. Now, whether they would be successful, I don't know. If the county were to come in, I think their chance of success would be greater. But it doesn't have to be the county. Everyone believes that's the obvious answer. Theoretically, the city of South San Francisco could be the
I
one to
say
file
we
for
go for
dissolution.
it. I think we-
Let's get a lot of information before we
Yeah.
make that commitment.
no, I think-
Hop on that horse, huh?
You know, the truth, in so many ways, and it was in the newspaper all the time. When we had newspapers in the seventies and
Oh, I
eighties.
miss those.
Yeah, it was
Jerry
pretty cool.
Fuchs, I miss
Because
Jerry Fuchs.
Because it really was, the council got rid of a tremendous burden and the potential, you know, horrible liability because of the condition of the landfill. And so they managed to kick the can down the road. That was a 50-year agreement originally, 77 to,
76 to 2026.
is that 50?
Wow.
Yeah, and I think if I could do it again, I might, but we only have 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not a lot of time, because it's a mess.
Yeah.
You know, they talk about the 12 to 18 month grace period, if you will. There are those who think that they won't make it.
That they won't make it that far.
Yeah.
No.
On
And
the
we
Harbor
lose
Commission
in-
will absolutely fail.
Oh, wow.
Given the current status of the and dysfunction in that group and the terrible infighting that's going on with that commission, there are those who are convinced that they're just not gonna make it. They're just not gonna, they can't even agree what time noon is, for God's sake, or when to hold a meeting, for pity's sake.
You know, it's unfortunate because the
It
Harbor
is.
District collectively is in a really bad space, just 10 years ago, where it didn't look like they were gonna be able to
Get out of
satisfy their debt, and they were able to,
They got that
yeah,
straightened out.
renegotiate things, and,
But now you've got,
they've survived. I mean, that's the best they've done, but they have survived up to this point.
you've got
But
dissension in the ranks, I guess. is
with the
what you
focus
could
of
say.
paying down the debt, so ergo, the lack of the infrastructure
Right.
improvement, I mean, that has been, and it's not to say that it didn't have merit, but there are consequences to
Sure.
that kind of decision.
Yeah, I would, again, support option B and C, along with the new information that you might get out of the consultant, along with whatever we can get out of the subcommittee, the liaison committee.
Yeah.
To that,
Go get 'em, guys.
I was gonna raise that point, is there guidance for staff to prepare for the subcommittee? Would you like us to propose some specific, topics, perhaps the debt and the terms of the debt, and which one is specifically at Oyster Point? Or some of the other areas where we may need, greater information? Is there,
Yeah.
how would we like to handle that first subcommittee?
I think that's good, and I'd also like to have you ask them based on this, on the CIP, you know, why, well, it's so
Now, this is the
disproportionate.
feel-good meeting.
Oh, I'm
Don't-
sorry. I'm sorry.
This
Meet
is-
and
you wanna
greet.
give us half a
Meet-
chance?
Meet and greet, I'm
This is
sorry,
all for
meet
their
and
head.
greet.
I wanna see how they're thinking, you know,
Okay.
do they want
I'll
it to
stay
be
out
over
of it.
tomorrow, and if so, what are they willing to put on the table?
Well, we could just leave it open, and, with,
They could
the
build
two
it.
council members,
Yeah.
for asking questions, open-ended questions, and see where they wanna go.
She's on the record with what she said as far as,
Oh,
Termination
yes.
of JPA?
Oh,
No,
yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's no, yeah.
okay,
She is on the
so
record.
that's a good starting point.
And so, going back to Pradeep, I
You wanna
would,
do nice
I support what he's saying, and once we get our consultant, if, at some point, I would like to have the opportunity to have staff prepare a report, because I think it would be worthwhile if we have something in hand, and this council is in agreement to going to a step to meet with the 3 other supervisors to say, this is what we've, after thought and study, this is the path we'd like to take. Would you support that kind of
Exactly, at our
What
expense
3
for
did you have in
consultant.
mind?
The other
groom?
She's
Groom.
there.
She's there, Dave Pine's there, we just gotta get Warren,
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 but that's our 3 vote.
is the coast part of Warren's?
No, that's all
That's
Warren's
all
thing. Warren's is Southern County.
Yeah.
It's
That's right.
unincorporated, Menlo Park and, East Palo Alto and.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think staff has a direction, and what we will do
Yes,
is,
we should.
continue to refine these numbers, get the economic study done, bring that back to council with any revised numbers, so you have as clear a forecast as we can possibly create on what the future might look like, so you're comfortable in giving direction. And then I will work with staff, just prepare some questions to provide on the side to the vice mayor and Councilmember Normandy to have in your pocket, which you might want to bring up at the subcommittee meeting. Our next study session on this will be after that subcommittee meeting, so it'll provide some fodder for discussion.
And that subcommittee, meeting is here, is in South San Francisco, or did
That-
we decide
yes,
that?
that's-
They're coming to us?
That's what we have said, they have not objected to that.
Okay,
That's close.
That is, that's good for me.
yeah,
Yeah, because of your work.
yeah.
Jim, is there any further
hell are you
direction that you require? Okay, I think from a staff perspective, we've gotten the direction we were
Okay.
looking for. Unless there's anything else.
There being no further, is there any further business to do? And we're adjourned.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is